All right, so after the last chapter, we have a little section here on Pompeii, which is a really cool section of the book. I wish we were in class because there's some movies that I'd love to show you and really talk about this. So Vesuvius was this huge volcano in Italy, and it was showing signs of eruption, and the people really didn't believe it was going to erupt. There was one young man who was able to escape. He got out early enough that he got out, and he actually wrote a book about this whole eruption, which is how we have a lot of our information. And it happened so quickly that the ash and the lava covered the entire city of Pompeii in feet and feet of rock and ash. And it happened so quickly that people couldn't escape. So it literally covered their bodies where they sat or laid or were at the table. I mean, just instantly covered them, and it almost froze them in time. Later, the city was discovered, and when they dug down, the bodies had decomposed, but the shell, the shape of their bodies, was formed in this lava and concrete mixture. So when archaeologists found it, they poured, a substance in there that went into the shape of the people and actually showed us exactly how they lived and how they died and told us all this history about Pompeii that we just didn't know. It's a pretty morbid tale, but it is so incredibly fascinating. After you read this, we'll read this together. I've also attached a link to a YouTube video that kind of talks a little bit about the eruption. So take your time to read this. It's really cool. The picture on the left is just artwork showing the eruption of Mount Vesuvius 2,000 years ago that covered Pompeii in 16 feet of rock and ash and killed thousands of people. So about 2,000 years ago in Italy, a volcano named Mount Vesuvius erupted and completely destroyed the city of Pompeii, killing thousands of people. As much as 16 feet of hot ash and rock buried the city, wiping it from the face of the earth. Pompeii lay forgotten until archaeologists uncovered it in 1748. Excavations have continued since then, revealing a city preserved like a time capsule. What can this long-dead Roman city tell us about life in cities today? In fact, they're not even done uncovering the city. They're still working on it, which is pretty cool. And my sister-in-law went last year and visited and sent a whole bunch of pictures, and it's on my bucket list. I definitely need to go and see this. So Pompeii lies southeast of Rome, near the present-day city of Naples. At the time it was destroyed, about 20,000 people lived in Pompeii. Many Romans also took vacations there. Pompeii was already an old town when Romans took control of it in 89 BCE, but they rebuilt the existing city in a particularly Roman way. At the center of every Roman city was a gathering space called a forum. This was where the most important public buildings were located. Meeting at the forum were two main streets, one going north and south, the Cardo, and one going east and west, the Dumacamus. The Romans laid out Pompeii's streets in a grid paralleling these two streets. In pre-Roman times, there were shops in and around the forum, but the Romans moved them all to a single large building that faced the forum. Bring this down here. All right, Pompeii's residential neighborhoods had their own smaller public centers. Shops were placed on side streets or on the ground floors of buildings where people lived. There were bakeries, grocery stores, and taverns. There were gyms, theaters, and a library. The Romans gave Pompeii a public water system. An aqueduct brought water into the city. It branched into three main pipes. These served more than 25 public fountains, from which most citizens got their water for drinking and cooking. The water system also served public baths, a swimming pool, and some private homes and shops. Urban planners study Pompeii. How can an ancient city destroyed 2,000 years ago have anything to teach us today? Think about the town or city where you live. Its street system must be well organized for traffic to flow smoothly. There's a mix of public and private spaces. There is probably a forum, although you may call it downtown, city center, or Main Street. In the neighborhoods, too, there are local centers of business and public life. and there is an infrastructure, the term used to describe the physical systems and facilities that make a city livable. During the 1990s, scholars at the University of Virginia made a detailed study of Pompeii's archaeology. The study was called the Pompeii Forum Project. One of its goals was to find out what Pompeii could teach us about today's problems in urban design. Urban planners worked on the project were guided by two main principles or ideas. The first principle is that a city is a public place. Many people must live and work there. For that reason, any new building should serve the needs of the people who use it, not the architect who designs it. The second principle is that a city as a whole is more important than its pieces. Therefore, new buildings must not look out of place among the old ones. Planners on the Pompeii Forum project learned that the Romans followed both of these principles in Pompeii. For instance, buying and selling is important in the life of any city. But the Romans did not let shops clutter up Pompeii's forum or residential streets. Pompeii's buildings all use similar forms, materials, and parts. The buildings served different functions and were built at different times, but the overall look was coordinated. Here it says Mount Vesuvius rises above the ruins of the forum that was located in the center of Pompeii. Now remember, all of this was under 16 feet of ash and rock, and they've unburied it. The Pompeii Forum Project compared two American cities to Pompeii. They were Savannah, Georgia, and Santa Barbara, California. While not nearly as old as Pompeii, both cities date back to the 18th century. By American standards, that makes them old. Did these cities follow the principles of urban planning used in Pompeii? Savannah was a carefully planned city. Neighborhoods were made up of family homes grouped around central squares. Each had a similar mix of lot sizes, block sizes, and street types. Businesses were along the river or in buildings that looked like homes. Some public buildings served one neighborhood. Others served larger areas, but none stood out from the city as a whole. Modern Savannah has spread far beyond its original core, but the city has adapted well. For example, a pedestrian path runs along the length of its main street. Walkers do not need to step on or off curbs to cross streets. Newer buildings blend in well with the character of the old. One exception is a shopping strip that cuts the old main street in two. Its buildings were designed in what was once considered a modern style, but one that is no longer in fashion. It broke both the rules observed in Pompeii. Today, urban planners call it an embarrassing eyesore. Oops. Santa Barbara was first settled by the Spanish. Its older buildings were designed in a Spanish or Mediterranean style. In 1925, an earthquake damaged the city. Since then, the construction of new buildings has largely followed Spanish architecture. A Spanish-style plaza lies at the city's heart. Many public buildings are located on or near the plaza. They include a city hall, a courthouse, a post office, a firehouse, and an art museum. You would have no trouble telling their purposes apart, but they all share some design elements in common. Their similarities help to link the city's blocks together. As in Savannah, buildings whose size or design stands out seem out of place. Here's a picture of Mount Rainier. It towers over the city of Tacoma, Washington. Scientists believe that one day this volcano will erupt again, as it did almost 200 years ago. Here you can see the Tacoma Dome here at the bottom. So if this mountain erupts, Tacoma would definitely have issues with possibly ash and some other issues from that earthquake. Any American city can learn from Pompeii. As older areas are torn down and replaced with new buildings and street patterns, urban planners hope that this ancient model can make modern cities better places to live. But some cities have another lesson to learn from Pompeii. Towering above Tacoma, Washington is 14,410-foot Mount Rainier. It's one of a line of 27 volcanoes stretching from Canada to California. And Mount Baker is in that list too. Mount Rainier last erupted less than 200 years ago. If it were to erupt again, it could let loose a flow of hot mud and rock that would bury Tacoma. Many scientists believe that this next eruption is a question of when, not if. So what does Tacoma learn from Pompeii? Mainly, that there isn't anything one can do to stop a volcano. Organizations such as the Red Cross publish information about how to survive a volcanic eruption. The surest way to survive is to evacuate, to get out of the way when the mountain starts rumbling. And the good news is that we have modern technology. So we usually have warning before a volcano erupts. Like when Mount St. Helens erupted, we had quite a bit of warning before it actually happened. All right, so you can close this, and if you want to, I have attached a YouTube video as well that tells you a little bit more about Pompeii. All right, guys, and then that's the end of our social studies. Thanks for hanging in there.